All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening for our virtual program, Inform, Enrich, Empower, Celebrate Local Latinx Leaders. My name is Marissa Rodriguez, and I am the School Age and Teen Services Outreach Coordinator with Fairfax County Public Library. I'll be moderating our panel discussion tonight. We are so excited to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month through this discussion with local leaders. I'd like to start by introducing our panelists. So we have Miss Annie Karina Packner, and she's a senior leader and communications strategist who's passionate about driving change in the public and private sector. As a leader in the federal government, she supports and empowers employees to reach their full potential and ensures American taxpayers receive the highest quality service. Most recently, Ms. Packner served as a White House Leadership Fellow, directing government-wide recruitment initiatives under the President's Management Agenda aimed at attracting early career talent from underserved communities. Previously, Ms. Packner served as Deputy Communications Director for the Department of the Treasury. Ms. Packner holds a bachelor's degree from Rutgers University and a master's degree from St. John's University in Foreign Languages and Literature. Ms. Packner was born and raised in the Dominican Republic and strives to honor the sacrifices of her immigrant parents by living a life of service. She lives in Virginia with her husband and 2 daughters. And we also have Lieutenant Colonel Cesar Rodriguez, and he's the Deputy Chief of the Space Control Division. He oversees the space control portfolio, which includes tracking and monitoring satellites orbiting the Earth, maintaining control of satellites, and providing satellite deterrent options to leadership. Throughout his 17 years of Space Force and Air Force service, he has been assigned to military bases and embassies in Las Vegas, Nevada, Los Angeles, California, Bogota, Colombia, Seattle, Washington, Santiago, Chile, and Tegucigalpa, Honduras. Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez was born in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, and immigrated to the United States as a child. He graduated with a bachelor's degree in international business from the University of Maryland and holds a master's degree in international relations from American Military University, in addition to attending a master's level course with the Chilean Air Force in Santiago, Chile. So thank you both so much for being here. Our first question we'll start off with is, can you tell us a bit about your background and your cultural identity?
Sure. So I will go ahead first. Thank you so much for having me. I always feel that I can't really talk about my background and my cultural identity without first talking about my parents and their own journey, because their journey is really my journey and what brought me here. So my parents were teachers in the Dominican Republic. And at the age of 50, they moved to the United States with my sister and I, really always with the hope of giving us more opportunities and opening more doors than we would have had in the Dominican Republic. So at the age of 50, they left behind their own parents, their friends, their careers, again, to give us that, what they looked at as a passport into educational opportunities. They always felt that a college degree from the United States would have the potential to give us more opportunities than we would have had otherwise. So at the age of 16, I arrived here in the United States. I enrolled as a junior in high school, and I had to learn English. I had to assimilate to a new culture. I was in a completely new country with no friends and with limited family. So from that moment on, from the moment that I went from high school, I then went on to college, then to graduate school. All throughout those years, I would say from 16 to well into my 30s, I feel that my cultural identity has constantly been shifting. I would say a few ups and downs. And I think that's first because when I arrived here at 16, I clearly felt like an immigrant. I was 100% Dominican. And the longer that I lived here, the more I started to feel that shift, because now I learned the language. The United States became my home, and I started to feel like I was neither from here nor from there. We like to say, ni de aquí ni de allá. And what I have realized throughout many years is that I don't have to choose. I don't have to be from here, or I don't have to be 100%, because the truth is that I'm from both places. And I think that is the beauty of biculturalism. And in a big part, I have learned that from sharing my culture, sharing my language with my own children, and just realizing that I'm just simply from both places, and that's the beauty behind it.
That's a beautiful answer. As you heard in the intro, I'm from Santo Domingo. Same thing. Parents decided to try to get a better life for our family, so we immigrated to the United States in 1989 when I was about 6 years old. And I also didn't know any English at the time. Went directly into first grade. Remember being in English as a second language for a few years, and then finally it clicked, and then I started to assimilate a little bit better into class and schools. Come from a big family, which is important to me, four brothers and two sisters, and my family decided to settle in Montgomery County because of family connections that we had in the area. Finally, I grew up in the Montgomery County area, and joined the military at 22. That's when I started as an intelligence officer, where I worked drone operations to help provide intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance to troops in Afghanistan and Iraq. Then I changed career paths. The military allowed me to do that, to become a program manager. So we call it an acquisitions officer. So first I started by launching GPS, global positioning system satellites, to replace the aging fleet. And then I went over to the Seattle area to help develop and build the upgraded aerial refueler tanker. I was then selected to go to foreign military school, and that put me on the path to become a foreign area officer, where I felt a lot of cultural enrichment going to different countries, and being able to see kind of different perspectives and approaches, and different ways of viewing things. So I was able to serve in Chile and Honduras with my family. And finally, I was given the opportunity to pursue space acquisitions in the newest service, the Space Force, where I'm currently trying to help pave the way for future Guardians. So in terms of my cultural identity, I feel the same way as as Miss Packner, that I'm kind of in both, multiple cultures. I feel I'm a US citizen, I'm serving the country, but at the same time, my roots and my blood are of Dominican heritage.
That's great. And both of you have achieved so much professional success. So I wanted to ask, what role did education play in your road to professional success? And were there any obstacles you faced in accessing educational opportunities? So I thought we can start with you for that one.
So it starts with my parents. So my parents really, I guess, told us how important education and schooling was. They received scholarships and graduated from the University of Puerto Rico from Dominican Republic. And so they emphasized the importance of education, and they had high expectations for us because they were able to do it. They're like, hey, you have to figure it out for yourself. So that was great, but it was also a challenge because my parents came to the US. They're not familiar with the US system, the timelines, the scholarships, financial aid. So I had to uncover that on pretty much on my own. And although both my parents worked, we still kind of had limited income with a big family. I was on free or reduced lunch for a big portion of my childhood. And then when that turned into applying for colleges, I kind of knew that it put me in this weird in between where my parents didn't make enough to help me pay for school, but they made enough to where I didn't get enough financial aid. So I had to take on a bunch of loans and pay for school my own way. Um, I continued working part-time, and I attended Montgomery College part-time, which was a blessing in disguise because I was able to save a bunch of money, and I was able to transfer directly into the University of Maryland Business School, which would have been really difficult to do straight out of high school. So when I did that, I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Went through a bunch of different phases of I wanted to be an engineer, architect, an artist, and then I finally took Business 101, and I was like, this is it. This is the match for me. So I did my 45 credits in Montgomery College, transferred directly in. And then a few years later, I got my Bachelor of Science in International Business. In the military, education, I think, is vital and it's continuous. As soon as I got in, I began training in my specialties. In every different specialty I've gotten, I've had to go to education and training for that. And thanks to the military, through tuition assistance, I was able to complete my master's at a reduced price. And finally, I was also fortunate enough to participate in professional military education with Latin American officers in Spanish. And I was able to go to abroad in Chile, like I mentioned, and have my family directly participate in the culture and learn the language. And it was such a great experience for us. So played a huge role. Education played a huge role in my professional success. Did have some challenges, but was able to get through those obstacles.
Certainly a lot of similarities between our two stories. One of my favorite quotes is from Nelson Mandela, and I can relate to it a lot because he said that education is the passport to the future. And that's the role that education has played in my life. I like to joke that both literally and metaphorically, because education has been my passport to even having the opportunity to study abroad. So when I was in college, for example, I had the opportunity to go to Spain, live abroad, study abroad, see a whole new culture, see another side of the world. And what I thought was already an expanded mentality that I had, having moved from the Dominican Republic to the United States, it just became even bigger. So there's a whole new world for me out there. And I know that that opportunity would have not been possible to me at the time without having gone through it, through the university, through Rutgers University. And something that I know is that education, to me, it's more than a piece of paper. It's more than a diploma. It really has given me the tools and the platform to get to know myself. When I was both in undergrad and in grad school, it allowed me to really get to know myself, to figure out what are the things that I'm good at, what are the things that come naturally to me. I very quickly realized it was not math and it was not science. I was more of a humanities person, languages and literature and writing and reading. And all of that journey of being in school, being with professors, being with students, getting to know myself has really shaped the trajectory of my professional career. And it just naturally continued to evolve that way. I think it also opened a lot of doors for me. Every job that I've applied to has required at least a 4-year college degree. So without that, I wouldn't have been able to have the opportunities that I have had so far. Something that I find somewhat funny, but I think it speaks back to the passions that I have, is that almost every position that I have held from my early career to my mid-career have required me to be at least bilingual. And I think it's because of my love for languages that I said, you know, if I'm going to be majoring and minoring in languages and literature, I want to be able to use those languages. So I've ensured that every role that I have taken on has allowed me to use Spanish and French as I'm serving the country and as I'm serving the American people. And in terms of obstacles, I think there were two main ones for me. One was certainly, as the lieutenant said, navigating the system and applying to college. When I was applying to college as an undergrad, I had been in the United States for 1 year. Looking back, I was clueless about how to apply to college, what scholarships opportunities may have been available to me. I applied to 2 universities. And now the suggestion is that you at least apply to 4 to 8. And I say to myself, I applied to 2, what would have happened had I not gotten into any of the 2? I did, but it was just for lack of awareness, lack of understanding, and knowing what was available to me at the time. So I would definitely say that that was an obstacle for me, the lack of the information. And then certainly financial. just like the lieutenant said, I had to take student loans to be able to attend both undergrad and grad school. And I also feel that had I known more of the scholarships that were available, having done that research, maybe finding people that were familiar with that, I could have probably secured scholarships rather than getting out so many school loans. I don't regret any of it. Education has been essential in my family. It's the reason my parents moved to this country. So certainly worth every penny in my experience, but certainly had to face those challenges and overcome them.
Yeah, it sounds like there were definitely lots of obstacles that you were able to push past and get to where you are today. What advice do you have for young people who are just now starting to think about their futures and the career path they would like to embark on?
For me, I would say if you of some advice is if you're really looking to embark in this journey, for me what has worked and has served me well is really knowing myself, which I think I mentioned before. Try to know before setting those goals, either for your educational goals or professional goals, what comes naturally to you, what makes you come alive when you speak about it, what activities do you do that when you're doing them, time just flies by because you're really so immersed into it that time just flies by. And I feel that if you follow that and you follow that thinking, you will live a very fulfilled life. I say that we spend a lot of hours working, and the very least that we can do while we're working is really enjoying and being passionate about the work that we do. So knowing yourself for me is key. Another one is, I would say, take risks. Apply to the school or the jobs that you think that you won't get, maybe because you think you're underqualified or you don't have the experience. If you don't apply, you have a 100% chance that you're not going to get it because you didn't even throw your name in the hat. And then if you do, then you may or you may not, but at least you're really putting yourself in the playing field and taking those risks. And I would say that a third advice is to make failure your friend. I tell my kids, you learn so much more from the mistakes that you make than from all of your successes combined, because those mistakes that you make and the things that you may view as failures today are the things that you're not going to forget, and you're not going to repeat them, and they're going to make you resilient. They're going to give you perspective, and they're really going to allow you to enjoy your successes a lot more because you had to overcome failures to get to them. So, and one last one is probably get yourself a good mentor, someone that's willing to share with you their experience and anything that they may be able to offer to you.
So a lot of similarities in terms of advice for young people. I think setting goals early is important. Just make sure that you have little goals that get you to your overall dreams and big stretch goals that you want to get to. Work hard. It's a lot more important to work hard and put in the effort than to be smart and intelligent. It's a process. It's about the journey, not the destination. Be flexible. A lot of times when you're young, you think you might know where you're going to go, and life takes you in a different direction. So just be prepared and be flexible to change course. And sometimes it ends up being the perfect thing for you. And then just be persistent. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't do what you think that you can. Just continue to work hard at it and continue to try. There's also, we kind of talked about this earlier. If we had known, there are plenty of scholarships and aid and opportunities out there for Latinos and for other underserved groups. So do your research, search for mentors, like you said, and give it your all. And I'm not trying to recruit anybody, but if you are being recruited in the military, don't just speak to recruiters. Also talk to Reserve Officer Training Corps programs and determine what path is best for you. You can go directly into the military, or you can go to college and then go in as an officer. So if you're interested in that, there's multiple paths. And then finally, I know you said for for young people, but for parents, plan early to start setting aside small amounts of money for your kids. Just a small amount every month adds up to help with university expenses. And if you're able to do that and they get a scholarship, then they can just use it for room and board or for day-to-day expenses and activities. So those are some of the advice that I'd give to young people and maybe parents as well.
Great, thank you. The next question I wanted to ask about is mentors. Did you have any mentors or role models that had a positive impact on your life or helped guide you towards educational and professional opportunities?
So I would say that I had different types of mentors. So I would say my parents, my brother-in-law, key leaders throughout my career, and then my family have really helped and been role models for me. So my parents started off, they set the foundation for me to kind of grow me into who I am today. My brother-in-law, he kind of vectored me in terms of my career. He's the one that gave me the advice of, getting into and joining the Air Force at the time. And then key leaders have provided the mentorship and open up doors and opportunities that I wouldn't have been able to get through if it wasn't for them. And lastly, but more importantly, just my family, the sacrifice that they've had to go through to support me to move around in the military life, and then just the support that they've given me. So those are the types of mentors and role models that I've had in my life.
Certainly, again, we're continue to share similarities. My most influential role models have certainly been my parents. I've always seen them working hard, serving others, and that has had a huge impact and influence in my decision to join public service and to want to serve and to want to help. My mom is the epitome of hard work and perseverance. My mom completed her bachelor's degree in the Dominican Republic while having four children, 2 jobs, and being married. So sometimes when I need an extra push and I'm saying to myself, I can't do this or I can't do that, or there's so much that I'm juggling, I think back to my mom and I said, if she was able to get a bachelor's degree with 4 children and 2 jobs and being married and running a household, it's hard to compete with that. So certainly always going back to my parents and seeing their hard work. With my dad as well. My dad is very big on embracing failure. And I vividly remember calling him one day because I was a good student and I usually got good grades. And one day I did not get a good grade. I got like a D or an F in something. And I called my dad crying. I was probably a senior in high school or college. And I thought he was going to say, well, study harder next time, or, kind of have a tougher response. And he said, well, it's good that you got a bad grade every time. Now and then something has to fail, because if everything goes right, if all you get are A's, then how are you really going to truly save your success? So that has always stayed with me, because the bottom line is we are going to fail many times. We're going to have detours and we're going to have to pick ourselves up. So having that advice from my parents has always served me well. And the last family member is my sister. I have been called to serve in the federal government in different capacities, some that have taken me from when I lived in New Jersey to commuting to Washington, D.C. weekly, leaving my 2 children behind at home. And although I was doing it because there was a need and I felt like I needed to be there for my agency, it was also a great learning and leadership opportunity for me back then. And I remember calling my sister and telling her, there's no way I can do this. I have 2 young children, and how do I commute back and forth between New Jersey and DC? And my sister always being a role model and mentor and telling me it's not a matter of whether or not you're doing it because they need you and it's a great opportunity for you. It's more of a matter of how do we make it work? How do we all chip in to make it work, so you can go and have that opportunity and you can go and help your agency. So again, just my parents, my sister have served as great role models, and also professionally speaking, having supervisors, having managers that have really looked out for opportunities for me and seen my hard work has really paid off in the opportunities that I've been able to have in my career.
That's wonderful. And I love that bit about embracing failure. I think that's so important in building resiliency. Um, and because we're talking about mentorship, are there any ways in which you've been able to pay it forward and help others?
Yes, I think that's one of my favorite things. I tell my kids, if you're having a bad day, go and help someone. It's going to make you feel much better about whatever it is that may be happening in your life that day. And I try to apply that to myself as well. So when many years ago, I used to be an adjunct professor and I taught Spanish and French at a community college. And I would engage in conversation with the students, and they would come up to me and say, "Oh, professor, I am majoring in Spanish or history or, you know, you name it, in math." And I would get really excited and say, "Oh, that's great. So what do you want to do with that degree?" And all of a sudden they would have a blank stare in their eyes and say, I don't know. And so I really enjoyed sitting down with students like after class or before class and helping them make that connection between the degree that they were pursuing and how can I put that to use? How can I use that to serve others? How can I use that to make a living and support my family? So helping them make that connection. Like if you're majoring in history, do you want to be a teacher? Do you want to be a writer? What is it that you want to do? What career paths can you take? So that's something that I certainly enjoyed from very early on. And now, since being in the federal government, there's a lot of opportunities to mentor. I was recently part of, they called it a speed mentoring session. So the Office of Personnel Management held a mentoring session, and there were various mentors and mentees, and they had different breakout rooms. So I spent 5 minutes in each breakout room with a set of 3 mentees, and it was all sharing about my experience, what it is serving as a White House fellow, how did I get to this point of my career, and answering any questions that they may have. So in that same way, I love reviewing resumes and just helping pay it forward more than anything. What others have done for me, I certainly want to be able to do that for younger generations that are truly just going to be the next leaders of our society.
Yeah, so I can't say that every day I try to do a good deed for somebody. I wish I could, but I do look for opportunities where possible to mentor young officers, young men and women in the community. Because I think in the military they say bloom where you're planted, but I really think that you should be the farmer or the water that makes everything around you beautiful, and not just worry about yourself and how you sprout up and how good you're doing. So I try to seek out young officers in my chain of command, go to universities, talk to people about different career fields, answer their questions. Um, there is usually a path in the military that gets you to a high rank, but I ask people, what are your goals? What do you want out of life? Do you want better work-life harmony? Do you want to be a general? And then kind of advise them on that. Not everybody has the same goals, and not everybody has to go through the same path. I also like to go to schools, do visits in underprivileged and underserved communities, to talk to children there, because I think they could benefit from exposure and positive engagement with members of the military. So I try to reach out to them, and just let them know that, we have similar backgrounds and that they can achieve similar success.
That's great. And that kind of feeds into my next question about representation. So recently, there's been a lot of discussion surrounding topics such as affirmative action and diversity in both educational settings and the workplace. Can you speak a bit about the importance of diversity and representation in education in the workplace?
So I think diversity is vital in education and in the workplace, and hopefully exposure and diversity provides exposure and hopefully understanding of different viewpoints, And I think that's critical, especially in these times of tailored algorithms and social media that can lend itself to confirmation bias and groupthink. It helps us see problems differently and come up with different, better solutions. And so that's kind of in general. And then in the workplace, I think cultural competence and language skills are extremely valuable. It helps you communicate and build stronger, deeper relationships with your teammates, stakeholders, and your customers. So both in the amount of people that you can reach and also in the depth of your connection. And then I think it's important for that senior leaders are representative of the general population. Um, this allows for diversity of thought in at the strategic level, and then also encourages young leaders that they too can be senior leaders. So I think those are some of the things that are important in terms of diversity.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. And I think that diversity, both in education and in the workplace, is crucial. I spent the last 12 more months working on one of the president's top priorities, which is attracting and hiring employees in the federal government that truly represent the diversity of our country and our communities. And I think that that goal is so crucial and so key, because even as a government, we can't effectively serve our people if those who are writing policy and are implementing policy don't come from diverse backgrounds. So I think that's crucial in the workplace, crucial in government, crucial in our educational system. And I just spent the last 12 months as part of this fellowship with a cohort of 18 senior leaders from the federal government. And we were all from diverse backgrounds, cultures, agencies. And I think everyone that came out of our cohort has an increased level of tolerance, of empathy, of acceptance of other people's ideas and just our differences. So if we don't practice that through diversity in school, diversity in the workplace, I think it's really hard to work those muscles to be just more empathetic and more accepting of each other's views. Something else that the lieutenant mentioned and that I very much agree with is if our next generation of leaders cannot see themselves in the leaders that we have today, whether those are teachers, doctors, politicians, it's very hard to think that they're going to aspire to those positions if they cannot see themselves reflected in them. So I just think that as a society, we need to make sure that we are encouraging diversity in every way possible, because it makes us better at coming up with solutions to any of the problems that we may have. But I think it really empowers the next generation of leaders to want to step up because they can see themselves in others.
Those are great answers. Thank you so much. And for our last panel question of the evening, I have, what does Hispanic Heritage Month mean to you?
It means a lot. For me, it's a celebration of how far we've come, and just really allows me to reflect on the many contributions that Hispanics have made in America. And I think when you think about it in every aspect of life, whether that is food, music, literature, sports, activism, we've had a role in everything. And for me, the beauty of our heritage and the importance that we pass it on to younger generations, it's very important. In my household, I take Hispanic Heritage Month as an opportunity to just really talk to my children more and more about it. I have a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old, and every year they appear on the news show of their school during Hispanic Heritage Month, and they share what it means to them to be Hispanic. And it's beautiful. They say, well, being bilingual and being bicultural is my superpower. And I want them to grow up feeling empowered by their biculturalism, and just feeling that it adds so much more value to who they are and what they can offer to others.
So when I first heard of Hispanic Heritage Month, I thought it was odd that it wasn't a month like the month of September. It's like a half of a month and a half of a month. But what's interesting is that's when a lot of the Independence Days are of Latin American countries. The 15th of September through the beginning of October is kind of like their, I don't know, their holidays or their patriotic holidays or their Independence Days. I see Hispanic heritage as a time to kind of celebrate, reflect on our diverse and distinct histories and cultures, and then just a time to kind of remember and connect with our roots. So that's kind of what Hispanic Heritage Month means to me.
Great, thank you. At this point, I wanted to open it up to our participants to ask questions. So you can either type a question into the chat and I'll read it, or if you'd like to ask your question, go ahead and click the raise hand button and I will unmute you so you're able to ask. I have one question in the chat to Annie. Coming to the United States and starting your junior year in high school sounds scary. What was the biggest challenge, and what advice would you give to a teen immigrant facing a similar experience?
Thank you. That's a great question. And it was a big challenge. But I think that what helped me was, and again, going back to family and going back to my parents, seeing my parents move here at 50. They didn't speak a word of English. They left their careers behind as teachers. So it was a given that I was going to give it my all to learn the language, to push through, and and to do well in school, to get an education, because that's what we came here for. And I knew that that was certainly going to be that passport, that magic key to help me unlock a lot of opportunities. So my advice would be to persevere, to work hard. The lieutenant said it before, just work hard. I always say, I'm not the smartest person in the room majority of the time, but I'm usually the hardest working person in the room. So whatever it is, I'll get to it. So I would just say work hard, and especially in this day and age that we have social media and access to so many people. Again, go back to finding mentors, finding people that are willing to talk to you, to guide you. I get messages from people that I've never heard of on LinkedIn that say, hey, I saw your profile. Do you have 20, 30 minutes? And I say, sure, it may not be today or this week, but let's plan something for next week. And I'm more than open and willing to share advice. And I have seen that as well with many other leaders. So just put yourself out there and seek that advice from others. But more than anything, work hard, because the sky's the limit if you go for it.
That's great. I see we have a hand raised, so I'm going to unmute Rebecca. Let's see. All right, go ahead, Rebecca.
Thank you so much. So as a first generation Latina, I have often battled with imposter syndrome throughout my professional career. How do you find the courage and confidence to feel enough? And how do you shake or snap out of that mentality?
So I'll start with that. First, I don't think you are an imposter. I think that whatever you've done to this point is because of the hard work and effort that you put into it. So because you're in that position, you deserve to be there. And so I don't know, maybe it's just, thinking about that and internalizing that, that you're not an imposter, that you're there because you deserve to be there.
Certainly agree with that. I know there's a lot of articles lately about imposter syndrome and how do we shake out of it. And I go back and forth between, is it a real thing or is it not a real thing? But I totally agree. If you are willing to do the work, if you have the curiosity to be better, to help others, to serve others, and to set goals for yourself and work towards them, that's it. I think everything will really start to fall into place as you go through those motions. So if when you're doubting yourself, know that you're not the only one doubting yourself. It happens to absolutely everyone. The highest leaders everywhere in government, in the private sector, have those doubts about themselves. I think it's what makes us human. So just tell yourself, I'm willing to do the work. I'm worthy of it. And if you need a reminder, again, find those champions that when you forget, they will be the ones to remind you.
We have any other questions? One question I had is, we've talked a lot about professional success. I wonder if there's anything you've worked on recently that you're particularly proud of that you'd like to share about.
So one thing that sticks with me is when we lived in Honduras, the Honduran people, I think the year was 2020, maybe 2021, in the middle of the pandemic, they had two back-to-back Cat 5 hurricanes. And we happened to have a base there in the middle of Honduras. And we knew that there were some people that were stranded. We used our connections with the Honduran Air Force and Honduran military to try to figure out where they were located, and working with the people on the base directly with the pilots, we were able to pass the coordinates to those people, and we were able to save their lives and help them to get off of that. And so I thought that was just, it made me feel like I was doing something that was helpful to the people of Honduras. And at the same time, it kind of demonstrated to the people of Honduras that the U.S. is there to help, and the U.S. is there to save lives and support them. So I thought that was a cool kind of recent experience that I had in the last 3 years that stuck with me.
I think it's going to be hard to compete with saving lives.
I didn't do it.
But you worked it. Something recently that I worked on, well, I guess it has been in the past year, has to do with trying to figure out what are the biggest barriers that agencies have to recruit young people into the federal government. Because the truth is, we have a very aging workforce. And if we do not recruit, and this is my plug for recruiting and for joining the federal government, is we won't have people to put out Social Security payments and process tax returns, which gives people credits to be able to go to the supermarket and buy things that they need. So something that I'm proud of from the past year has been working with agencies as a whole, but also individually, to help them figure out, how do we address the barriers that we face in recruiting top talent? How do we use social media more effectively to get to reach younger audiences, and finding agencies that are doing it really well and pairing them with other agencies that have a lot of room for growth, and then seeing how their number of applicants is increasing, the number of people that they're hiring is increasing, has been very rewarding. Something that I say that we don't do enough of in the federal government is sharing what's working. So being able to identify those agencies that are recruiting top talent and diverse talent from all across the country and doing it well, how can that be replicated with other agencies to make sure that we're attracting the young people that we desperately need?
I see we have a hand raised. So Jillian, I'm going to ask you to unmute and you can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you very much. And thank you, panel, for this great session. I heard mention of scholarships and minority scholarships. How would you guide like the young people? How would they look for like the scholarships? Where would they find it? I know a lot of them don't have the resources, to to go to college, or so how would they get started, to get the scholarships? And also, you mentioned, Lieutenant Colonel, that you could either go right after, in the military, right after high school, um, or go to college and then go in. What would be the best route, you, do you think? Thank you.
You want to start with the first question? I can start with the first
Sure.
question. So, okay, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say on the first part of the question on the scholarships, I'm no expert in scholarships, and I haven't had to do that myself recently, but I do have a lot of nieces and nephews that have gone through the process recently. So one of the things that I would say is certainly check with your school, check with your counselor if you have one, but certainly the school should have resources available that tell you where you can find more information about scholarships. I know that for a lot of them, for example, there's different criteria. So there may be some scholarships that are geared towards Hispanic or first generation students. You have to write essays for many of them. Most of that information, you can find it online, but I would say that probably most schools have some sort of summary or package or can guide you to the appropriate websites where you can find that information to be able to apply for scholarships.
The only thing, and I hope this is right, I'm going to make a plug for the library. You can probably also go to your local library, and they can probably help you out with some of that too. Obviously, you want to go with your counselor and your school first and do your own research. But if you're stuck, I'm sure that you can go to the library and they can help you out with that. And then in terms of the different options for joining the military, so there's two ways to join the military. You can join as an enlisted member, and so that's you go straight out of high school or at any point in time, as long as you're under 35 years old. And you go to a recruiter and you take a test to test your aptitude. And then based on that, they say, okay, here are the options of jobs that you can take. Then you normally go to basic training. And then after basic training, you get assigned your specialty, and they develop you in that career path. The other way that you can go is you can be an officer, and there's a couple of routes to be an officer. So you could do Reserve Officer Training Corps, which is what I did, which is you go to university, and at part time you participate in leadership development at the school. So you do leadership lab, and then you do a short summer where you do field training, which is kind of like basic training, but for officers. And then after that, you get your commission based on whatever's available that year and what your goals are. And then they set you on the path to be an officer. The difference is, as an officer, you have a degree when you go in. The other two routes to an officer is you go to an academy. And so you apply to an academy. And typically, you need to have a stellar GPA and record, and you need to get somebody to sponsor you, usually a representative or a senator of some kind from your state to sponsor you. And then you go into the academy, you go there for 4 years as part of your university, and you become an officer. And then the last way is to, after you get your degree, you apply, and it's very competitive. And then they select a few people per year, several people per year, to kind of go into specific careers that they need. So those are the three ways. And in terms of what's better, it's not that one's better than the other. It's just what you want to do, what your goals are. If you're thinking financially, you make more money as an officer. You can look that up pretty easily. If you go, all that information is available. What I've been told is if you start off as a second lieutenant, you make about as much money as you do when you're 12 years in as an enlisted person. So that's kind of the difference in pay. By achieving rank as an enlisted person, and after 12 years, you make the same amount as a first year officer would make. So if that's what drives you, that's the difference economically for you. But you know that it just depends on what your passion is and what you want to do.
Thank you both. See, we have another question from A. Flores. I'm going to ask to unmute and you can go ahead.
Yes, I came in late to your conference, but I did hear the last comments by Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez. Uh, I do want to emphasize that there is the OCS, which is Officers Candidate School, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but it used to be that you only needed 2 years of college, plus you were enlisted. You went in, had the training as an enlisted person, then you went to OCS. And that's the route that I took. So it is the quickest way to become an officer. And I think it's only like 2 months of training. And you graduate and you're a second lieutenant. You have the same rank as a person who went on the reserves or went to the academy. So that's an option that can be taken. And I don't know if that requirement is still 2 years. You can correct me on that, Colonel.
So yeah, so officer candidate school or officer training school, depending on the service, is when you have completed your bachelor's degree and you are applying to be an officer. What I think you're talking about is within the military, they have different programs where you can go enlisted to officer, and usually they only require you to have an associate's degree at the time to apply to then go into a university and transition to be an officer. So there definitely is that opportunity as well. Just because you enlisted doesn't mean that you can't get your degree and become an officer if you'd like to do that.
Thank you.
I see Jillian has her hand raised. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm going to put you guys on the spot. You've been so wonderful, and you know, and everything, and let me tell you, you look like politicians. Do you have any dreams or aspiration of going into politics?
Not on my end. No, it's funny. So in the last year, while being a White House Leadership Fellow, I was working as a civilian, so not a political appointee. And sometimes I pause when you tell people, "Oh, you're working in the White House." Like, wait, I'm a civilian. It means I take no sides. I'm only here to serve and to help. So no, not certainly. It has been posed to me as an option, because certainly you can work in the federal government and be a political appointee. But it has not been something that I have considered thus far. And we'll take that as a compliment.
Yes, I was going to say the same thing. Thank you for the compliment, but no aspirations of doing that, running for office or anything like that. I think that it's a challenging job what they do, and yeah, and I like to be more neutral than choose a side.
Do you have any more questions before we wrap up for the evening? Carol in the chat says we will vote for both of you for sure. Latino power. Well, thank you. Oh, I go ahead. Let me. All right, A. Flores, you can go ahead.
I don't know how much time you have, but I work in the schools here at Fairfax County, helping the teachers. I'm already retired, like you, Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez, and I also had a different job where I also retired from the OAS. But working with the Fairfax County schools, and the population of the Hispanic community is quite large, and I just don't feel that the kids at our schools here seem to be assimilated to the Anglo culture. They're pretty much on their own. I don't know if you guys have any kids in FCPS, but I just feel like more should be done to recognize this young population of Hispanics. At the school that I'm at, 60% are Hispanic. And I don't feel like that they belong to the community. So I don't know if you're trying to understand what I'm saying or any comments.
So I'm not 100% sure. I do recognize that in different parts of Fairfax County, there is less diversity and more diversity in schools. So in the schools that my children attend, there isn't a big Latino population, and I think that there could be more. There could be more done to make sure that that's brought out. That there's more I don't know, representation. But I think you're talking about in schools where there's a majority of Hispanics and you feeling that they're not getting the support that they need and they're not getting maybe the leadership and encouragement that they need. And I think that things that maybe I could do, take steps, is maybe try to go out more and talk to younger kids in underrepresented, underprivileged communities and making sure that I'm making contact and reaching them and seeing if I can help. And I will say to the group, if anybody, wants to talk to me about anything, career wise or military wise, feel free to reach out to me at any point in time via LinkedIn or anything. And I'm more than happy to, spend the time to talk to you or your kids or anybody that you think needs help.
Yeah, the only thing that I'll add to that is that I think there's always room for growth. So of course, there's always more support that we can be providing, not only to Hispanics in our area or even throughout the country, but to multiple cultures. I like to take personal responsibility and think that it starts with me. So anything that I can do to help, within my community, I try to do that. I try to set that example through my children. Again, as the Lieutenant Colonel said, the school that my children go to is probably doesn't have as many Hispanics. And I make sure that, they share that there are Hispanic and they talk about their culture because I think that creates awareness in our community. I mean, they're half Anglophone and half Dominican, and people will just think that they're Americans. And to those populations that could use the additional help, I think it would be helpful for all of us to use our networks and get the word out where we don't see that happening as much, to make sure that we're providing that additional support. I think there's always room for growth in that area.
Great. Thank you so much. And we are at 8 p.m., so we've run out of time. As we conclude our program tonight, I'd like to give a huge thank you to our panelists for being willing to share their experiences with us tonight, and also to our audience for attending and having such insightful questions. Gracias a todos por venir. This was a wonderful discussion, and I hope everyone leaves feeling informed, enriched, and empowered. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes. Have a good night.